Hello folks, and welcome to my videos of the Siege of Orgrimmar, the raid in World of Warcraft. I just thought it would be kind of fun to make a couple of videos kind of explaining the bosses and how the bosses work, what kind of mechanics they have, because I played a lot of Looking for Raid, which is the most basic of forms of raiding. And I see a lot of mistakes going from new players, and I thought it could be kind of fun to make somewhat of a guide explaining some of the bosses and what kind of abilities that you should avoid. And some bosses actually have abilities in which you have to stand in the shit that they're putting on the ground, and not a lot of players know this, so that's why I wanted to make this kind of a guide, so to say. I will upload videos from all the bosses on normal mode, and I will try to get all the bosses up on flexible also. If I miss any bosses on flexible, it is because we haven't played that boss for a while. In the flexible videos, I will talk mostly about what attacks you should avoid and what attacks you should maybe stand inside of. More of a do's and don't kind of situations. In the normal videos, I will more thoroughly go through why we use different tactics and why you do certain stuff. Most stuff like don't stand in this or stand in this are the same on both flexible, normal and heroic. But sometimes you have to shift your tactic depending on which difficulty you are playing on. Just because in the normal mode you take so much more damage if you miss a single ability that you have to stand in or stand out of. And in flexible you can make mistakes. In this first video we will talk about the Falling Protectors, which is actually the second boss in the Siege of Orgrimmar, since I totally forgot to record when we played Immersius, which is the first boss. So I am going to upload a video of Immersius on normal, and if we ever get back to playing him on flexible, I will upload a video from that encounter too. But from this moment on we will actually we will start with the second boss, the Fallen Protectors. This time we used a different tactic from what we usually do, since we wanted to get an achievement. And I'm going to explain exactly what achievement is about when we get to that point in the video. But first we are going to start with explaining some of the mechanics of the bosses. The Fallen Protectors consist of 3 different bosses, and their names are Rook Stone 2, He Softfoot, and Sun Tenderheart. Rook Stone 2 has a couple abilities that you should watch out for. First, he has an ability that's called Vengeful Strikes, and this ability stuns his current tank target. And shortly after that he does a cone of physical damage in front of him. He also has an ability called Corrupted Brew, which is basically a keg of beer, of corrupted beer that he throws on a random player. When the keg lands, it does damage in a 5-yard radius from where it lands. So it's you actually see when it happens, and it's important that you run out of it so that you don't get the damage on you. When you have damaged Rook enough and he is down at 66%, he will do a thing that's called Desperate Measures. At this point Rook disappears from the battle and summons 3 different adds, which is called Embodied Misery, Embodied Sorrow and Embodied Gloom, and you have to kill all 3 of these before Rook can come back to the fight again. The tactic is usual so that you take down the Embodied Sorrow first. He has an ability that's called Infernal Strike, and this ability lands on a random player, and you can see a huge round area around that player. And if that player is alone, after a couple of seconds he takes all the damage for himself. But if a lot of players is standing inside of the yellow ring, then the damage is split in between all of the players. So it's really important that everyone is basically during this part of the fight you should stand on top of each other and then take down Sorrow as fast as you can. The second ad you want to attack is the Embodied Gloom. He casts an ability that's called Corruption Shock. This attack deals a huge amount of damage around the area of different players, and it is actually interruptible, so if you can interrupt this you should. And then kill Gloom as fast as possible. The third ad you want to kill is the Embodied Misery. The Embodied Misery does an attack that's called Defiled Ground, and this attack knocks the Embodied Misery's tank back. As you can see, Misery kind of punts back the current tank and leaves a big kind of void zone behind her. So it's important that the tank tanks Misery away from the group, because the group does not want to stand in that puddle of poop. When you killed all the ads, you should start attacking He Softfoot. He Softfoot is basically a rogue. He uses a lot of abilities called Garrote, Gouge, and different kind of poisons. And basically most of these attacks just does different kind of damage. Each tank, the tank should probably read up a little better on what they actually do, but from a DPS's point of perspective, he doesn't do anything that you as a ranged DPS really should care about. But both tanks and healers should be careful about his attacks and probably should read up a little more about what they actually do. And as with Rook, when he reaches 66% of health, he goes into his version of Desperate Measures. He Softfoot disappears from the fight and summons an ad. That's called Embodied Anguish. And it's really important that your raid kill this ad as soon as possible, since he has a kind of a debuff that he puts on a random player. This debuff is called Mark of Anguish, and you can actually push this mark around from different players. You target a friendly player and push the Mark on Anguish onto them. Usually we kind of have a system in which we say that, oh, this player punts the anguish to this player, and that player holds that Mark of Anguish for a little while and then punts it back to another player, and then we go on and on. Because each player can just hold the Mark of Anguish for a couple of seconds or maybe a minute or so. Since the debuff roots players in place and also deals a hell of a lot of shadow damage over a certain period of time, well, that is as long as the player actually holds the Mark of Anguish. Any player that holds the Mark of Anguish gets the Embodied Anguish ad fixated on them, and that's why it's so important that you punt it to another player. For example, I as a mage cannot hold the Mark of Anguish for such a long time since I'm a cloth bearer. And now we can see that we are actually doing a kind of a different tactic on this part, because there is an achievement that you can get. Before the fight, we measured for how long you can stand from each other before you kind of lose focus on each other, and then we put down a red and a green marker, and then we also assigned a couple of players to the red one and a couple of players to the green one. And then we start passing the Mark of Anguish in between each other. We hold it for a couple of seconds and then pass it to the next player, while maintaining damage on the ad, because we still want to kill him, but we need to keep him alive for such amount of time that we can actually get the achievement. So we pass the Mark of Anguish from player to player until our raid leader says that, yeah, now we got it. And then we kill the Embodied Anguish. Then we move on to Sun Thunderheart and get her down to 66% of health. Sun Thunderheart has 3 different abilities that she uses before she goes into Desperate Measures. And the first one is called Shaw Shear. It's basically a purple beam that's on targets on a random player. The beam does damage to that player and also around any players that is about, I think it's like 5 yards or something around that player that is targeted by the beam. So the player that's targeted by the beam should probably move away from the group, and the group should move away from the person that's targeted by the beam. Then she has an ability called Calamity, which is a kind of a raid-wide damaging spell. And it hits pretty hard, but on flexible, if you have pretty good gear, it doesn't do that amount of damage. But I'm guessing that on normal, it's way more important to look out for, especially for the healers. And then she has a dot that's called Shadow Ward Bane. And she can put this on 4 players maximum. This should be dispelled by healers. After she gone down to 66%, she does Desperate Measures. When she does Desperate Measures, you can actually see that it's happening, because she puts up kind of a big bubble in the middle of the room, and the rest of the room is just a shadowy vortex of doom. So basically, get out of the vortex of doom, stand in the bubble in the middle. And she also summons 2 different ads. One that's called Embodied Despair and one that's called Embodied Desperation. While standing in the bubble, you take 35% less damage. The ranged DPS should focus their fire on the Embodied Despair and the Embodied Desperation. They're standing outside on each side of the big vortex thingy. They don't have any abilities of their own, they're basically just standing there. So the ranged DPS should fire as much as they can on them to kill them. And the melee DPS should focus the fire on small adds called Despair Spawns and Desperation Spawns. These adds will spawn from different raid members in the group, so since everyone's standing in the middle, it's really easy for the melee DPS to find them and kind of just murder the shit out of them. And that's basically it. When Sun is done, Rockstone 2 usually does his last ability that I didn't mention, and it's called Clash. And it basically he targets a random player and he kind of does a fly kick towards them. And then he starts channeling a kick that's called Corruption Kick, and basically he just stands and starts swooping around the area in which he's standing on, and he's making a whole mess of damage while he's doing that, so everyone that's in that area should fucking move from it. But after that, you go back to Rockstone Toe and get him down to 33%. Then he will do his desperate measures again, and you'll just do exactly the same as you did before. You kill the sorrow, you kill the gloom, you kill the misery, and watch out for their attacks. And then you go to He Softfoot, get him down to 33%. You kill the embodied anguish and you punt the Mark of Anguish around to different players, and then you go on to Sun Tenderheart. You get her down to 33%, and she does her desperate measures. You kill the despair, you kill the desperation, and then you go back to basically the last part of the fight, in which you have to kill all of the 3 bosses at the same time. Basically kill the one that has the most health, then go on to the next person that has the most health, and go on and on and on until all of the bosses are dead. And that is basically it. That is the Fallen Protectors on flexible difficulty. And we actually got the achievement also. We punted the Mark of Anguish the right amount of yards, so that was amazing. We got that also.